Two of my wife's lovers came to our wedding and ruined it. I am ashamed in front of my parents and relatives. And when I filed for divorce, my wife told me she was pregnant. I'll just come out and say it, my wedding turned into a disaster that would have made reality TV producers drool. Two of my wife's lovers, yes, two, showed up uninvited and turned the entire event into a soap opera. It's humiliating to even type that out, but here I am, sharing my story on Reddit because, honestly, I don't know what else to do. My parents are ashamed, I'm embarrassed in front of all my relatives, and my marriage? Well, that's headed straight for the shredder. Let me back up. I'm Thomas, 31, and until this whole mess, I thought I was an ordinary guy with an ordinary life. I met Jenna, my now soon-to-be ex-wife, at a friend's barbecue about 3 years ago. She was bubbly, outgoing, and had this energy that made her the life of every party. Me? I'm more of a sit-in-the-corner with a cup of coffee type, but something about her drew me in. It wasn't long before we were dating, and a year later, I was down on one knee, popping the question. She said yes, and I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Looking back, there were signs. Jenna was popular, let's say. She had tons of friends, was always texting, and seemed to have a knack for making people feel like they were the only one in the room. I told myself that's what I loved about her, that she had this vibrant personality I could never match. Little did I know, that charisma had a darker side. The wedding day started off fine, well, fine-ish. My groomsmen kept me calm while I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach that I chalked up to nerves. Jenna looked stunning walking down the aisle, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe that everything was perfect. It wasn't until the reception that things started to unravel. During the speeches, I noticed a guy, mid-30s, slicked back hair, looked like he belonged on the cover of a romance novel, hovering near the bar. He wasn't on the guest list. At first, I figured he was a +1 I hadn't met, but something about the way he was looking at Jenna made me uneasy. Then, as Jenna's college friend was giving her toast, this guy walked up to our table, stared straight at her, and said, "So, this is what betrayal looks like." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look, and Jenna's face went pale. She mumbled something about not knowing who he was, but the guy wasn't having it. "You don't know me?" he said, his voice rising. "We've been seeing each other for 6 months, Jenna." 6 months. And this, he gestured around the room, is what you were hiding. I couldn't breathe. My mom was clutching her pearls like she'd just seen a ghost. My dad looked ready to toss the guy out himself. I was frozen, stuck between wanting to sink into the floor and needing answers. Before anyone could react, another man, this one younger, scruffier, and clearly tipsy, stood up from one of the back tables and shouted, "Wait, 6 months. Bro, she told me I was the only one." You can imagine the chaos. People were whispering, gasping, pulling out their phones to record, because of course they were. Meanwhile, Jenna was sitting there with her head in her hands, and I was trying to figure out how my life had turned into a bad sitcom. I didn't say anything at first. Honestly, I was still trying to process the whole, 2 guys claiming to be my wife's boyfriends at our wedding thing. The first guy, slick hair, was still standing there looking smug, like he'd just done me some huge favor by blowing up my wedding. The other guy, let's call him Scruffy, was now halfway across the room, loudly asking the bartender if they had whiskey because he needed something strong for this. Meanwhile, Jenna, still sitting there, frozen like a deer in headlights. My mom leaned over and whispered, "Thomas, do something." But what was I supposed to do? Break out a megaphone and start asking for everyone's attention so I could explain why my bride had 2 uninvited +1s? Before I could even stand up, Jenna snapped into action. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over and shouted, "Everyone, please, this is just a misunderstanding." Which, yeah, might have worked if slick hair hadn't immediately shot back, "Misunderstanding? Really? Jenna, you told me you loved me. That you were leaving him for me." The entire room went from awkward murmurs to full-blown gasps. Someone in the back actually yelled, "Oh, hell no." It would have been funny if it wasn't, you know, my life falling apart in front of everyone I knew. Now, at this point, I had to say something. I stood up, tried to keep my voice steady, and said, "Okay, everyone, let's calm down but Scruffy cut me off. He slammed his drink down, yes, he'd managed to get a whiskey, and shouted, "Don't defend her, dude. She's been lying to you. To us." That was when Jenna decided it was time to go on the offensive. She turned to me and hissed, "Thomas, you need to handle this. They're lying." I just stared at her, trying to figure out if she really thought I was that stupid or if she was just hoping I'd go along with her because I was too embarrassed to admit what was happening in front of everyone. "Lying?" I said, finally finding my voice. "So, who's lying, Jenna?" "Him." I pointed at slick hair. "Or him?" I pointed at scruffy. "Or are they both lying? Because, honestly, I'm having a hard time keeping track." She didn't answer. Instead, she just turned and bolted. Like, full-on ran out of the room. For a second, I thought about chasing after her, but what was I even supposed to say? "Wait, come back so we can figure out which boyfriend is the real homewrecker." So there I was, standing in the middle of my own wedding reception, my wife halfway to God knows where, and half the guests either awkwardly staring at me or pretending to check their phones like this wasn't the most dramatic thing they'd ever seen. And then, because of course it wasn't over, my dad decided to step in. He walked up to me, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Son, maybe you should just, call it a night." "A night?" I said, louder than I meant to. "Dad, this isn't just a night. This is my wedding. Or at least it was supposed to be." He gave me that look. You know, the one dads give you when they're trying to remind you to act like an adult in public. "Thomas," he said quietly, "just take a breath. We can figure this out later." Figure this out later. As if I hadn't just found out in front of everyone I knew that my wife had apparently been auditioning backup husbands. I couldn't stay in that room. I didn't even say anything to the guests. I just walked out, found a quiet corner near the catering tent, and sat down. And that's when it really hit me. The wedding, the marriage, all of it, it was over. And I had no idea what came next. Want to know how it ended? Let me know. Trust me, it gets even crazier. Alright, so there I was, sitting alone near the catering tent, trying to wrap my head around everything. I could still hear the muffled buzz of the reception behind me. People were talking, plates clinking, someone even had the nerve to laugh like this wasn't the most awkward wedding they'd ever been to. I wanted to scream, but instead, I just sat there, staring at the ground. I don't know how long I was out there before Jenna's maid of honor, Lisa, showed up. Lisa's one of those people who's always got something to say, whether you want to hear it or not. She sat down next to me and lit a cigarette, even though I'm pretty sure the venue had a no-smoking policy. "You okay?" she asked, like I wasn't sitting there with my entire life unraveling around me. "What do you think?" I shot back. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. She blew out a puff of smoke and said, "Look, I'm not defending Jenna. What she did was, well, it was bad. But you need to know something." That got my attention. "What do you mean, something?" Lisa hesitated, which, if you know her, is not normal. She's the kind of person who'd tell you your haircut sucks while you're still sitting in the barber chair. But now, she was fidgeting with her cigarette, like she was trying to figure out how to say what she was about to say. "Thomas," she finally said, "I didn't know about the guys. But Jenna hasn't been happy for a while. She said you don't pay attention to her, that you're always working, and—" "Wait," I interrupted, "you're blaming this on me." No, she said quickly, "I'm just saying that maybe this didn't come out of nowhere." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife was cheating on me with 2 different guys, and somehow, Lisa was trying to make me feel like I'd driven her to it. I stood up and started to walk away, but Lisa grabbed my arm. "Thomas, wait," she said. "I know this is a mess, but you need to figure out what you're going to do next. And whatever it is, do it for you. Not Jenna, not your family. You." I pulled my arm away and walked back inside. The reception was still going, but it had turned into more of a circus. Some of Jenna's friends were arguing with my groomsmen, my mom was trying to calm down my aunt, who apparently thought this was the perfect time to bring up her divorce, and Slick Hair and Scruffy were nowhere to be seen. I guess they'd both decided they'd done enough damage for one night. That's when I saw Jenna. She was standing near the back of the room, talking to her mom. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but her mom looked furious, and Jenna looked tired. Defeated, even. For a split second, I felt bad for her. But then I remembered why we were in this mess to begin with. I walked up to her and said, loud enough for everyone around to hear, "Jenna, we need to talk. Now." Her mom stepped back, and Jenna followed me outside. She crossed her arms as soon as we were alone, like she was already gearing up for a fight. "What do you want me to say, Thomas?" she snapped. "I messed up, okay? I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I repeated. "You're sorry. Jenna, 2 guys just showed up at our wedding claiming to be your boyfriends. How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the ground, like maybe if she didn't make eye contact, this conversation wouldn't actually be happening. Finally, she said, "Thomas, it's complicated." "Try me," I said. She sighed and said, "I didn't mean for it to get this far. At first, it was just attention, you know. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like you didn't even see me anymore. And then, I don't know. It just spiraled. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs." "So what?" I said. "This is my fault because I was working to support us." "No," she said quickly. "I mean, maybe. I don't know. I wasn't thinking." "Well, you better start thinking," I said. "Because I'm done. We're done. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you spin this around on me, you're dead wrong." I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked back inside, grabbed my dad, and told him I was leaving. "Leaving? What about the guests?" he asked. "They'll figure it out," I said. "Right now, I just need to get out of here." And that's exactly what I did. I didn't even grab my stuff. My jacket was still hanging on the back of my chair, my phone was somewhere in the gift pile, and I think I left my wallet in the dressing room. I just walked out. If anyone noticed, they didn't say anything, or maybe they were too wrapped up in the drama to care. Either way, I was done. The valet looked surprised when I handed him my ticket. "Leaving already?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Change of plans." It felt like forever before he brought the car around. I stood there under the awning, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and music coming from the reception hall. For a moment, I thought about going back in. Not because I wanted to, but because it felt wrong to just leave. But then I thought about Jenna, about the look on her face when she admitted what she'd done, and I knew I couldn't stay. When the car finally pulled up, I got in without another word. The drive home was a blur. I don't even remember most of it, just headlights flashing past and the sound of my own breathing. My phone buzzed a couple of times, probably people texting to ask what the hell was going on, but I didn't check it. I couldn't. By the time I got to my apartment, I was exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. I felt like I'd aged 10 years in the span of an evening. I unlocked the door, walked inside, and collapsed on the couch. That's when it hit me, I wasn't just walking out of a wedding. I was walking out of a marriage. Because, like it or not, Jenna and I were legally married. The ink on the marriage license was barely dry, but it didn't matter. This wasn't something we could just call off. There were papers to file, lawyers to hire, assets to divide. I sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, trying to wrap my head around it. How do you even start something like that? Do I call a lawyer tomorrow? Do I wait for Jenna to make the first move? Do I send her a text, or do I wait for her to send one to me? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Jenna had not only betrayed me, but she'd done it in a way that ensured maximum humiliation. Everyone at that wedding was going to go home with a story to tell, and I was the punchline. My parents, my friends, even the bartender, they'd all seen my life implode in real time. And the worst part? This was supposed to be the start of our lives together. I'd spent months planning this wedding, making sure everything was perfect for Jenna. The venue, the flowers, the food, I did it all for her. And this was how she repaid me. With lies, with infidelity, with 2 uninvited guests who'd completely derailed the day. I couldn't sit still anymore. I got up, started pacing around the apartment. I thought about calling my dad, but what was I going to say? "Hey, Dad, just wanted to let you know your son's marriage lasted all of 5 hours." No. I couldn't handle the pity in his voice. Instead, I grabbed a notebook off the kitchen counter and started writing down everything I could think of about the divorce. What I needed to do, who I needed to talk to, what questions I needed answered. It was like I was trying to take control of the situation, to make sense of something that didn't make sense at all. Call a divorce lawyer. Figure out who keeps the apartment. Cancel the honeymoon. Tell work I need a couple of days off. Deal with the guests. That last one stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't even thought about the guests. Half of them were probably still at the reception, trying to figure out what to do now that the groom was AWOL. Would Jenna tell them the truth? Or would she spin some story about how I'd overreacted, how I was the one at fault? The thought made my stomach turn. I needed to get ahead of this, to make sure people knew what had really happened. But how? Did I send out a mass email? Post something on social media? Or did I just let people believe whatever they wanted to believe? I didn't have any answers, but I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't let Jenna control the narrative. Not after everything she put me through. By the time I finally put the notebook down, it was well past midnight. I was drained, both physically and emotionally, but I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying the day in my head, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. I thought about calling Jenna, demanding answers, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. Because one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It's a lot to take in, I know. But trust me, this is just the beginning. I had just started to feel the tiniest bit of calm, like, maybe I could make it through this mess without losing my mind, when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. Whoever it was could wait. But then it buzzed again. And again. When I finally checked, there were 3 missed calls from Jenna. I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the block button. What could she possibly have to say that I'd want to hear? But curiosity got the better of me, and I answered the next call. What? I said, not bothering to hide the irritation in my voice. Thomas, she said, her voice shaky. I need to talk to you. Yeah, well, now's not a great time, I said. I'm busy figuring out how to undo this disaster you've turned my life into. Please, she said, and there was a desperation in her voice that I hadn't heard before. It's important. I sighed. Fine. Say what you need to say. There was a pause, and then she dropped the bomb. I'm pregnant. I froze. It felt like the room had gotten 10 degrees colder. What? I finally managed to say. I'm 2 months pregnant, she said. It's yours, Thomas. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. 2 months. That would mean, it had to have happened before all this. Before I found out about the other guys. But still, how could I trust her? And I'm just supposed to take your word for it. I said, my voice sharp. After everything you've done. How do I know it's even mine? It is, she said, her voice breaking. You're the only one it could be. I let out a bitter laugh. The only one? Really? Because last I checked, there were at least 2 other guys in the picture. So forgive me if I'm not jumping to believe you. Thomas, she said, and now she was crying. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But this baby, it's ours. Please, we can figure this out. We can make it work. Make it work? I said, my voice rising. You think we can just slap a band-aid on this and pretend like everything's fine? Jenna, you torched our marriage. There's no coming back from that. She was sobbing now, but I didn't care. I was too angry, too hurt. You know what? I said. If you're pregnant, fine. Deal with it. But don't expect me to drop everything and play happy family. And don't expect me to believe for 1 second that this baby is mine until there's proof. Thomas, please. No, I said, cutting her off. I'm done. You made your choices, Jenna. Now you get to live with them. I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I sat there, staring at the phone, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. Could she really be pregnant? And if she was it even mine? It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me all over again. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Jenna had managed to find a way to complicate my life even more. What do you think? Should I have handled it differently? Or was I right to walk away? Let me know, because honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out.